Welcome, folks. Welcome.
Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in a few minutes, but feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and where you're coming in from. Welcome. It's good to see folks rolling in. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. So nice to see y'all here. Thanks for joining us. I think we have the whole country represented. Look at these go by. Ohio, South Carolina, Missouri, Maryland, New York City, Delaware,
Pennsylvania.
New Jersey, Louisiana. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for spending some time with us. We're going to give it a few more minutes. Florida.
I got to shout out Florida.
People are here. Nina and I are anchoring the coast. She's in Florida and I'm in Washington. Let's see who can get the better numbers.
Yes, I'm here for that. We should do a competition or Folks, we're letting more folks come in and we'll get started shortly. Thank you for folks who are putting, if folks are joining, we're asking folks to put their name, pronoun, and where they're coming from tonight. Where are they based? Thank you, Olivia.
All right, I think we can probably get started, but please continue to introduce yourselves in the chat. Love seeing those come through. This call is webinar style because of the high volume of RSVPs, so congrats. So please make sure during this time you're using the chat vigorously to connect together. Tonight we have a really exciting workshop on courageous conversations that Nina's going to introduce in just a minute, but I also see a lot of new faces here and we are super excited to see you. Welcome. And because of that, we're going to do a quick reintroduction of what Moms Next Door is, just to get level set for everyone here. Thank you for taking time out of your evening to spend with us. We're excited to see the new faces here and glad to see returning folks. Moms Next Door is a pilot project, and it's an opportunity to get equipped, to get skilled up and fired up to lead in communities that you all get to shape right here together. So members who sign up will receive a monthly e-newsletter that includes the invitation to monthly virtual workshops like we're doing right here, right now, and a toolkit full of opportunities to unlock the in plain sight, everyday ways that we can connect and lead for change through political acts of service. So what does that mean in real terms? We are here to be informed, to be an information and training hub as you think on all of this information and how you want to build or be supported in community-driven political work. This work is bigger than any one of us, but if we all take our small part, our impact can be unstoppable. So here we're curating the tools and helping spark ideas so that you are in the driver's seat while we keep you updated on the latest happenings in the world and tools and skills that can help propel you and provide action opportunities and other tools for you to use in your own community organizing. And that includes a platform that we'll be introducing soon called the Moms Rising Organizing Platform, powered by Control Shift. And we'll be launching that at our June convening, so I hope that you'll join us for that. You'll also get the Moms Rising monthly Moms Next Door dispatch, which I just mentioned, the newsletter, and that'll have actions with suggested readings and books that you can pick up and more. So thank you for being here. Tonight we have a super exciting agenda, a super exciting guest, and I'm going to pass it off to Nina to introduce that.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Just going to do some quick little logistics, and then I'm going to preview this fantastic conversation that we're eager to get to so we can have plenty of time for questions at the end. So just know that that's coming and that we will have lots of space for questions if we do our job right tonight. So wanted to say really quickly, again, this call is webinar style due to the high volume RSVP. So please use that chat vigorously to connect together. Already seeing you all doing that in the chat. Great. Please keep it up throughout the conversation. For folks who are more interested in person-to-person connection, we do have that on some of these calls, and we're also going to be providing options in the chat for our next meeting, and we're going to be talking a little bit about other opportunities that are coming down the pipeline for smaller group, more connection along as this program progresses. For the last second meeting, so for folks who didn't join the meeting last month, it was Moms Are the Original Organizers. In that conversation, we talked about how moms already have all the tools at their disposal y'all. Oof. To be organizers in their communities, from everything from organizing in their PTAs to the way that we show up in community to fill gaps of the system when it breaks down. And so if you'd like to learn more about that conversation, you can check it out on our blog, and we'll drop that link here a bit. But many of you also did the homework for that. So folks, we're not going to go over the homework in detail like we've done in past calls. But if folks want to tell us a little bit in the chat about how your event planning thinking went, if you did your homework and you want to talk a little bit about it, we'd love to hear about it. And so tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about setting up your own event and what that looks like. And we'll collect those to talk about in the future. Another thing that we want to say is we want to preview some things that we're going to expect this summer. So we have office hours coming soon for folks who want to dig in deep on things like organizing your own local group, organizing your own local event. We know that there's always, right now we got 74 people on this call. It's beautiful. So we want to make sure that folks who want a little bit more of that person-to-person connection have that opportunity with us. So we're going to be launching some office hours, so keep an eye out for that. And we are also going to be launching some tools for folks to use in community that should make organizing your community a lot easier, and more information to come on that. So right now, though, today we're going to have a great conversation with Joan Blades, the co-founder of Living Room Conversations and a co-founder of Moms Rising. Yes. The reason that we came together on this conversation was many of you voted for this. And so for folks who remember the first Moms Next Door meeting, we laid out a series of different topics that we all could learn about in the cycle of this program. And this was the most chosen topic. And that's not surprising to me, because to me, this conversation really hits home for me following the election. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that and just tee up the conversation with Joan. So I made a commitment after the election, and some folks who are on the call already know this, to be in intentional and authentic relationships with people with different political views as me. And what I experienced has really radicalized me to the importance of relationships across political differences, because of what I found that frankly surprised me. Is that I shared more values and I had more in common with people with vastly different political views than I had realized. And it really challenged my own biases. I really want to name is that there is a lot of harm happening in communities right now. And there are people in the political sphere that are perpetuators of that harm. And I know that I hear daily in my community about things happening with immigrant communities and our schools. So I don't want to undervalue that or undermine that. But where is it that we have shared values, I think is different. And how is it that we find those shared values? So for example, I have become really, really good friends, and some folks have already heard the story, with my neighbors who, they're a Republican family who are very supportive of their trans child. And likely really voted for differently than I did in that last election. And I say that because I had a lot of biases and assumptions about who they were there and where their values were. And I was really surprised and shocked to find that their values were not that disaligned from mine, or even disaligned at all in most places. And so I found that the more I approach conversations across differences with curiosity and compassion, that the more I'm growing and learning and understanding and able to bridge the divides I see in my own communities. And I hope eventually like we can utilize this idea of like curiosity and moving in conversation together to bridge the divides that we're seeing across in our country. And I know so many of you are likely here because you've experienced this, because there's been someone in your life who you've fallen out with because of these political divides. So we're hoping that this is going to be helpful in those conversations, especially because you all asked us for this, right? And that's why it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Joan Blades. I'll make sure Joan is on the screen. Hi, Joan.
Hello. So great to be here with you today.
And I'm going to do your quick bio, Joan, and then I'm going to get out of the way so we can get into this conversation. Just so folks, and I know folks can read the bio here, but I'll just cover some top lines. Joan is a co-founder of Living Room Conversations, an open source effort to rebuild respectful and civil discourse across ideological, cultural, and party lines while embracing like these core shared values, right? And so Joan has been doing this for a long time, prior to any of the time that I've been thinking about this or talking about this. So we're really excited to have her. And also just really excited that she's also one of the co-founders of Moms Rising. So Joan has just seeded beautiful, amazing things across the board in our work. And she is also the co-founder of All Sides for Schools, a partnership between allsides.com and Living Room Conversations, which we're going to be learning more about throughout the conversation. Now, I'll let folks read the rest of the description here, and note that we're going to have time for questions at the end. So if as you're listening to Joan and as you're hearing all the fantastic information coming through her experiences across these different organizations and what she's learned in having these conversations across difference, go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. We're going to be tracking them and collecting them. And so if we don't answer it right away, just know that we are tracking them and holding on to them for the end of the primary piece of this conversation. So now I'm going to pass it over to Lauren, who's going to be doing this fabulous conversation with Joan.
Joan, thank you so much for being with us today. It's so delightful to see your face. So back in 2017, you and your friend John Gable did a great TED Talk discussing the importance of speaking across differences and the dangers of isolating ourselves with only people who share our own views. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and what led to the launch of what is now Living Room Conversations?
Happy to. Wonderful to be here. I live in Berkeley, California, and I'm also co-founder of Move On. So there came a point back in 2004 when I went, wait a minute, why aren't conservatives concerned about climate? And I realized that I would have to really be intentional about speaking to people with different views, and was part of a group called Reuniting America, and found I had really great conversations and learned a lot talking to leaders on the right, and actually was able to do some very productive work with leaders on the right back in 2005. And 2006 is when Kristen and I co-founded Moms Rising, because most people have forgotten that Move On started around a pretty unifying idea and an appeal that, love Clinton or hate Clinton. The best thing for the country was to censure him and move on to pressing issues facing the country. By 2006, it's like people across the political spectrum tend to love mothers and children. That's what Moms Rising is about. It was, okay, how do we really dig into this shared space? And when Kristen and I wrote this book, The Motherhood Manifesto, back in 2006, we were really careful to have it be appealing across the political spectrum. Now, what's so deeply troubling is by 2008, it was harder to have a conversation across political lines. And, Kristen and the Moms Rising team is amazing, doing fabulous work. And it seemed to me like we needed to make it possible for conversations across difference to happen in a really big way, because it's so powerful to talk to people. So was the inspiration for Living Room Conversations. And so it was in the bridging movement that I met John Gable, who was focused. So my focus is on relationships, because we don't actually even listen to people really until we're in relationship with them. You talk to someone that you see as other, and it's just kind of, But once we care about someone, my friend Jacob in Utah, he didn't have climate on his list of concerns when I first met him. And it got there, not because I'm so persuasive, but because he cares about me. And I care about Jacob, so I don't want him to feel marginalized. And it's that love we have for each other that brings it in the most meaningful human way. But John is, my conservative friend, and he was all about the media. We're living in separate narratives. So no wonder. And so all sides is news from left, right, and center, side by side. And you kind of look at it and go, oh, maybe that's what's happening. And we realized that we needed to have both. We need to understand what the narratives are, and we need to be in relationship. And those two things together, with this focus on our core values, because most of us have a lot of shared values, can allow us to do bridging or democracy strengthening. And now we're talking about peace building too. So I could go on, but that's the core of it. And I think the thing that people were most taken with by the TED Talk was that facts were good, but what they saw is that John and I, we really respect and care about each other. And that changes everything.
I love what you said about how you can't really listen until you're in relationship, and how this is really budding from that place of love for each other. And that's how we can move forward together, right, is through that value. And one of the things we hear most from our members, and quite honestly in our own lives, and including folks here who voted for this topic, is how hurtful and challenging, and in some cases really scary it is to open up and have these conversations about political differences, particularly right now, sometimes even within our own families. What are some of the best strategies or tools that you would offer folks entering into those conversations with people that they have built relationship with, but that have possibly been ruptured because of prior conversations around these differences?
Okay, so that's a massively big question that we could spend the whole time on and more, right? So I will try to, one of our conversations is conversations in troubled times, which allows people to say, I'm not ready for this conversation. But let's talk about some other things. Starting right in on the sore point is not the way we often get to the destination we're after. It took us a long time to get as dysfunctional as we are societally. And I hate to say it, but it's going to take some time for us to restore trust. The level of trust in our country is at an all-time low. It's trust in the government, trust in the media, trust in each other. And this work of personal connection is just kind of beautiful and exactly what we need to be doing. And one of the reasons Moms Rising is so great for it is we all love our kids. We want our kids to have a great future. And, if you can start with knowing that you share that vision, then very often you can move forward in a productive way from there. That said, there's a part of this that's, very confusing, because this wonderful person I love has these views that clash with my understanding of things. And so it takes a deep breath, stepping back, and really being curious, about, where did you come to that idea from? If you can dig into your curiosity, we have a whole set of conversation agreements. Living room conversations are 6 people having a very structured conversation around a specific topic. And we have over 150 conversation guides. And one of them is listening courageously, and, we also have abortion and guns and responsibility, but the values conversation are actually a beautiful way to start. And sometimes not even about a topic that is left, right at all, like technology and relationships. The differences that really make a difference, that are really interesting there, are age differences and how technology has impacted and is in some ways enhancing, in some ways detracting from relationships. Beautiful conversations that go deeper. And it all starts with, I like printing out a sheet. Some people just do it electronically, but it's like we have these 6 agreements to start with. And the first one is be curious and listen to understand. And this whole thing is basically what we learned in kindergarten, that people know how to do this. Though I will also say, we also know there's some people that don't, even if they say they're going to agree, don't know how to do it. It's not in their capacity. So it's not everyone can do this, but a huge number of people can. And the people you love or care about often will make that extra effort. So setting a table so that the conversation has this agreement about respect and suspending judgment, and noting any common ground and recognizing differences. It's a really strong way to start. And then we just have 3 rounds, which the first round is a little getting to know each other with touching on some of your deeper values. Just 3 questions, you choose one. And the next is questions about the topic at hand, which is about your personal experience with that topic. We had a faith community did this on guns and responsibility. And I heard, back from a table that had 2 men that were ready to die for their Second Amendment rights, and a woman that had been traumatized by guns, not once, but repeatedly. And they heard each other. They went away from that table with an understanding about how important, the guns were to these men, because it related to their fathers and how they grew up and how this woman had been harmed. And so you're not transformed completely in a conversation in your views, but you become more appreciative of the nuance, and that other views are not from ill will. Really digging into everybody's humanity and that dignity we all want to have. And the end of it is just a reflection and next steps. And ideally, this is a practice. It's a lot of faith communities and libraries have monthly living room conversations, and people just choose the next one. And some people are regulars and other people come every other time, and it's a lovely thing to do. And then people take that into their lives, and they have more skills for the individual engagements, because most of the time we haven't set outside an hour or 90 minutes to have a deep conversation. Anyway, I could go on about this for a long time, but I wanted people to be able to ask questions, so I will.
Yeah, and I think that those resources are in the chat, so I think that's a great point about this is a little bit about building our skill and our muscle, and really like digging into our own curiosity. And it makes me think of I've been reading this book by Monica Guzman, and this idea around a curiosity principle. I mean, I know she's your colleague, but I've been reading it, and this connection to having relationships and conversations across different. So I wanted to show a quick clip for folks, and then we can go into the next question. I think we're queuing up the video in just a second.
I'll say a word about Monica. She's part of Braver Angels. And Braver Angels is another group that provides resources and training in the bridging movement. And there's a whole bridging movement that's trying to help people connect across differences in different ways. And I think Moms Rising. Oh, okay.
In one CBS YouGov poll this year, most Americans said that the biggest threat to the American way of life is other Americans. In one CBS YouGov poll this year, most Americans said that the biggest threat to the American way of life is other Americans. Now, it's true. There are people at our political extremes who are so consumed by hate that they are worth fearing. But researchers at the University of Pennsylvania looked into the hostility each side sends the other, and they found something fascinating. They found that people on either side of America's political divide assume the other side despises them twice as much as they actually do. This fear, it's a problem because you can't wonder about something you think is out to get you. But certainty, that's much worse. Think of certainty as the arch-villain of curiosity. You can't wonder about what you think you already know. There's no gap, so there's no pull. And we make conclusion after conclusion about people we don't know. Each conclusion kills 100 possible questions. But issue after issue, our conclusions are wrong. Take immigration, for instance. Most Republicans, when surveyed, say 6 out of 10 Democrats want open borders. But only 3 out of 10 Democrats do. Same survey asked Democrats, how many Republicans believe that properly controlled immigration is good for the country? They said about half. You know how many Republicans actually believe that? 85%. It was a 33 percentage point difference. If our assumptions about people on the other side of the divide are this far off, how many bad conclusions are we making? And how many good questions is that killing? Curiosity busts through the reality distortion fields that are blinding us to each other for one beautiful reason. Every human being wants to be seen. I've been a journalist for 15 years, and I've only recently realized that most of my thousands of interviews are something many of us crave and few of us encounter. Conversations focused on understanding without judgment. People say that listening is about paying attention, being present. And these things are critical to good listening, but they're not what listening is about. Listening is about showing people they matter. And the way you show people they matter is by aiming your curiosity at them. Ask yourself, what kinds of people do I talk about but never with? Whoever is underrepresented in your life will be overrepresented in your imagination.
Thank you. So we encourage folks to watch that entire talk. It's a good watch. But her claim here is that radical curiosity, which is like turning our assumptions into questions in the spirit of listening and learning without an intent to convince people of our point of view, allows us to fill information gaps that help us bridge relationship and understanding to find our shared values. Now, as a campaigner, this can be really hard to buy into, right? We want to move forward with solutions, and persuasion feels important to that goal. Do you agree with this principle of curiosity? And what would you say to folks who might struggle with this, urge to convince?
We have a conversation on persuasion that I think is really, really helpful, because there's science that tells us that facts don't convince people. I mean, first you have to have that relationship piece. And, the question is, when are you convinced? When are you successful in convincing? They found that deep canvassing is really very effective. That's about relationship. And perversely enough, I actually think not trying to persuade is the most persuasive way of getting people to shift their views, because it is about that connection. And human beings are social. Our context is more predictive of our views, of our voting, than almost anything else. And if I live in a community that all believe that we should be, that climate is not really a problem, or that, we have a huge problem with the government, then I'm probably going to believe it too, because most people aren't experts. And my friend believes this, and my very respected elder believes this. Well, if I have a different belief, if I articulate a different belief than that, I'm going to be afraid of being excluded. Being thrown out of the pack was a death sentence in a primal way, right? It's primal. So when we have connections across difference, that makes it feel less dangerous to consider something different. It is scary to articulate something that's very different from what your community says. And so I live in a very homogenous community in Berkeley, and it's all very progressive. But, in a community that's very mixed, people are very careful what they say, and there are all these flags that go up. And when you're in a mixed community, sometimes presumptions are made, but you get more careful. And I know people that are progressive in conservative communities that are also feeling very, like people don't see them on some level, and they don't lift up their hand and say something because they know it's going to be tough. So building the foundation of mutual respect and care is golden. And I'll also say, we're talking about community, we're also talking about family. It's kind of heartbreaking what's happened with some families. I know one woman who's like so polar opposite from certain members of her family, and she just says, I keep loving on them no matter what. Family comes first. Some people can do that. And everyone knows their circumstance so much more than I ever will. I can point to resources that are really great for kind of honing your own personal perspective on what's going to be comfortable. But we all live in very different communities, and navigating that is, I like starting with the aspirations in general. We have a lovely conversation on belonging and going from there.
I love that. Given the time, I want to move, and I see a lot of questions popping up, although I have been not doing a great job of multitasking between listening and monitoring for questions. But I'm going to move us to Q&A. And if my Moms Rising friends can help make sure that we lift up those questions, I'll start with the ones that I have in the Q&A queue, and then we can move into others. So someone is asking, I am looking to motivate other like-minded people to protest. Do you have any suggestions?
Like-minded people. I think I would be listening to what would motivate them. Yeah. Does it feel meaningful to them? Yeah. And hope that they are interested enough that it will come along. But that's, that I'd say having the persuasion conversation with them might be a really interesting way to go. And you might learn, some people will never be comfortable with that particular form of engaging, and you want to meet people where they are and find a way for them to participate that works for them.
Thank you. We also have a question from Susie H. Sorry, my chat keeps moving because there's so many people talking. I love it. How do you connect with people whose beliefs are based on lies and they won't listen to the truth? Interesting.
I think sometimes you can't. It's the first acceptance of that there are people but the question I ask some people, is there anything you're concerned about? And trying to find where there's a shared concern can be really helpful. And Braver Angels did a deep dive on trustworthy elections last year and the year before. They got a consensus around over a couple hundred points and came up with 3 principles that I think 99.5% or more people would agree to. Everyone wants trustworthy elections. Now, we worry about different things, and we know that there are going to be questions in all the close races unless we do the work now to ensure. So there's a place where you've got a lot of potential agreement. And I bet there are a lot of things around families that you could also go for agreements. So I tend to acknowledge that we've got a good distance to go, but it's starting with the agreements and moving from there. Years ago, I had a living room conversation in my living room with the co-founder of Tea Party Patriots, and 2 of his friends and 2 of my friends. One of my favorite ways to have a living room conversation, because I get to meet a couple new people, I get to have a couple of my friends there, and we all have some connection. And this conversation about crony capitalism led us to understand that we had 100% agreement around some key points. And one of them was around criminal justice reform. Too many people in prisons, war on drugs, not success, gotta use evidence-based practices. And that actually formed a foundation for some really meaningful work. So you never know. And then we want to have a conversation about fracking, and we weren't able to have it because our facts were so different. You just couldn't have a conversation with differing facts. And that's a whole additional story. I won't go into it. That's interesting.
It sounds like a great one. I wish we had so much more time. Anita in the chat is asking, what is your background? Psychology, sociology, ministry? Just curious.
I was an attorney mediator. I actually wrote the 3rd book about divorce mediation when the attorneys were still arguing about whether mediating a divorce was ethical, because they were only looking at finances and then they weren't looking at the family system. And it was a time when a lot of kids were having a really hard time. And I'm happy to say mediation is now very common in divorces and a good thing.
Thank you for sharing that. I love mediation work. We also have Bobby asking, why is it that the harder someone tries to convince us that they are, the less likely they are to believe us?
Yeah, that's why it's so good to think about your own form of persuasion and when you are persuaded and not. I think most of us don't like being pressured. And we start reacting and going the other way when it's like, when is persuasion manipulative? If it feels manipulative, it's like, go away. Don't mess with me. You know, what's so hard is we're feeling such urgency, and the changing our environment, our social environment, building trust is far harder to do than losing trust. And the core of a healthy society is trust. That's on some level the fundamentals of what we're trying to do. And I honestly think moms are some of the best voices for building trust. I love the way Moms Rising shows up in the world.
It's interesting that you say it like that. I do think that moms are particularly well suited, because when you were saying that, it reminded me of how I talk to my preteen son, right? Like, I have to remember that he's a developing person, and like I'm asking curious questions rather than trying to persuade him. Because when I come in with the hard sell, he's like, absolutely not. I have zero interest in. But it is that relational piece and the trust, and moms do that every day, all day. Another question is, how have people found the courage to start these conversations in your experience?
Some people see that their community has gotten fractured, particularly faith communities. And so that can be a source at the beginning. There's some faith communities where it starts in a faith community and then it expands out into the greater community. Sometimes it's just people that are deeply curious about all these differences. And all you need to do is find one person with the other viewpoint that you're interested in. And they bring two friends and you bring two friends, and you can have a really interesting conversation. Libraries, I think, are doing it because they're trying to build community. Libraries have been redefining themselves in the last many years. In schools. Schools are places where, all these kids come together and they need to learn how to navigate with the diversity we do have in our communities and greater world, and how to understand what bias is and where misinformation and disinformation comes from. I often have said that, if we had a conservative friend, they could ask us when, some crazy rumor comes out that Hillary has a child sex trafficking ring in the pizza parlor. Say, I don't know, I think that might be misinformation. But if you're just around all people that are getting the same misinformation, and I'm not able to keep track of what's going on the right, but I saw someone talking about the lack of interest of people on the right. And I know a lot of people on the right have felt attacked, have felt, that there's no opportunity for actually having a good thing happen from conversing. And that's why, I brought up the trustworthy elections issue or clean renewable energy. There's another place where we have a lot of conservative states that are doing all sorts of clean, renewable energy. And you don't have to say the word climate, and yet it will come up. And when people recognize things have changed a lot, you don't have to even believe in climate, and you can agree that clean, renewable energy is a very good thing for us to be investing in. It's good for our economy, it's good for our country. And when people act in a way that is consistent with a different belief, it often comes along. So that, yes, I want change immediately. And I've just seen that the fight gives us temporary change, and we have these horrendous swings back and forth that are tremendously destructive. We need everybody's goodwill in the room and creativity, and to move forward in a way that can be sustained long term. And that's hard, but I think we got to do it.
I agree. I think we have time for one last question, and I think you are getting to this one, so I want to lift it up. What best advice would you give folks on the ground for citizens to prepare for the 2026 election, and specifically towards fair elections?
Well, that's the trust in elections conversation. And I think it would be wonderful. And if that got organized locally, in fact, I'm hoping to get a few pilots going that are not just living room conversations. Living room conversations are just one tool in a much larger toolkit. We've got the Braver Angels Trustworthy Elections Report. We want to have, kind of election officials involved. We want to have local leaders of all sorts engaged, so that after the election, everybody in whatever community can say, our elections, this is how they go, and they are very trustworthy. We want people have local power and local responsibility, and we want them to have huge pride in the quality of their elections. In the world of peace building, doing a project together is one of the very best ways to create trust. And this is some conservatives don't show up because they feel like talking is not valuable. This is something that's very concrete that we need to do. So whatever it is, listening to hear what the local community really cares about and wants. We also have a schools community toolkit we did in collaboration with National Association for Community Mediation, because some schools are having a terrible time right now. And that is, once again, a much more comprehensive approach to dealing with the divisions and trying to create the relationships that allow for constructive problem solving.
Well, I see a potential future collaboration, or maybe more iterations of this conversation as we head towards 2026 with the tools that you've mentioned and this community here, if folks are interested. So I hope folks stay engaged, and we can maybe think together on how we can build trustworthy elections, because I think this is where the power is, in this room right here. Joan, thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing your wisdom, and I can see in the chat, like, there's just so much heart and emotion here, and I think you really hit the nail on the head. A lot of us are feeling all of the emotions right now, and being able to think through, like, how do we do this in our own relationships and communities is the path forward. But having those tools and the knowledge that you've seen this work is so critical. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been lovely to have you.
You're most welcome, and thank you. You guys are the expert in those local areas, so I'm grateful for what insights I'd love to do the work together, because I'll learn so much, and learning from each other is how we make things happen.
Wonderful. Well, we look forward to continued conversation. Thank you so much, Joan. I'm going to pass it back to Nina to talk about next steps.
Thank you so much. I just want to add my appreciation for Joan. And I just want to say really quick, I see all my red state folks in the chat. I know it can feel so, I live in Florida, and I live in live in a red area of Florida. And I understand how hard it can feel in those particular areas. But I'll name, and it's not an expectation from us that all of you will do this and that everyone will feel safe doing this in their areas. I just want to name that because that is a reality. For some folks, it really won't feel safe. And in some cases, it won't be safe. But it is possible. And that was the experience that anchored me in this, is that I moved to a red area from a very blue area. And I've been really dabbling in relationships. So stick in there if you're interested in this, and we can continue to talk about it in the weeks and months to come for folks who are interested in digging into that more. Of course, it's never an expectation. We understand that folks are at different places. So I will wrap us up. And again, big thank you to Joan for sharing her wisdom of doing this for so long. I wanted to go a little bit into what are some of the next steps for the next call. Monica, if you can, we'll pull up the last slide. And thank you so much. We'll be starting to set up some office hours with Lauren and myself. Something that we've heard from all of you is that you want more time to build events, to figure out how to do this locally, to build, to figure out how to have these kind of conversations locally, and to have kind of more one-on-one workshop opportunity. We're going to be rolling that out. And so keep an eye out for that. And we're also going to be rolling out as Lauren already said earlier, the mom organizing platform with some fantastic tools that you can use locally. And we actually have a Moms Next Door group already set up on that platform that we're going to be inviting folks to in the follow-up email to this call, in case you want to join that group and have conversations with each other. Maybe, someone's like, oh, I tried this in my state, and, oh, I have a similar state to that. And so to build that community and conversation, so that these conversations don't just exist in this chat on these Zoom calls, right? So just know that those things are coming. And I skipped my own agenda, but the next meeting is going to be on analog organizing and alternatives to Facebook. So one of the things that we've been hearing about is that folks are really looking for, what does it look like to organize not using tools like from Meta, essentially Facebook or Instagram, or how is it do I have conversations and I get away from those spaces where folks are not feeling, because of data and because of the politics around those different platforms, aren't feeling as safe to have those conversations. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to come with some concrete tools. And so please join us for the next call. That you can get the link to that event, hopefully in the chat. And if it's not working for whatever reason, I was having trouble with that earlier, we're going to email it to everybody. We know we usually have it on the call for you, so apologies for that if that doesn't work out, but we will email it to everybody who was on this call and everyone who signed up for the list. Thank you, Olivia. I appreciate you. It is in the chat, in fact, the next event. So please RSVP for our next call to get that analog organizing component and some of those alternatives to Facebook. And then again, joining the Moms Rising, the Moms Next Door community group. And I'm going to go ahead and drop that link in the chat to the Moms Next Door community group. And you'll see, and that you'll get a little bit of a preview of one of the tools that we'll be talking about the next meeting. And that's a wrap, friends. Thank you so much for joining us. Big thank you to Joan. We had amazing participation throughout this entire call. Thank you for staying with us. We are so excited to continue this conversation, and we hope everybody has a lovely evening, and we'll see you in June.
Thank you.